One Question is brought to you by Turnkey Search, a top industry search firm since 1996. Bill, you spent 23 years at Notre Dame. You spent 2 at Ball State. You've been at Marquette for nearly 2 years now. Given your experiences, generally speaking, what advice would you offer to senior leaders in the industry and or aspiring administrators, all of whom, want to be ADs, on how to strategically think about their own career track, given the last 25 plus years for you?
Well, I think a couple of things come to mind. When I first began to think about being a director, when I first got hired at Notre Dame and was kind of climbing the tree there, I didn't kind of grow up in the industry like some others have, so I wasn't thinking all the way along the line that someday I want to be an athletic director. And really, it was Kevin White, when he became the AD at Notre Dame, who said, and there were a few of us there, he said, you guys ought to think a little bit about this as an option. So I started to think to myself, maybe I could get there. Maybe that is something I should do. And I realized that for probably the first 15 years of my career there, I just had my head down doing the job and not really thinking about opportunities that might exist out there. And, it's ironic. I recently had a conversation with Heather Like from Eastern Michigan. We were in the MAC together, and we happened to be on a panel together a couple of weeks ago. And I think she said something that was really interesting to me. She said, there are some people in our business who spend their whole day looking for their next job. And there are some people in our business who don't spend any time looking for their next job. And probably the right answer is somewhere in the middle. And I think that's exactly right. I think I was in a mode where I wasn't spending any time thinking about that AD job. And when I finally kind of put my hand up and said, I'd like to start thinking about this, I realized I wasn't very well networked. A lot of folks didn't know who I was because I had my head down doing the job. And so I think those administrators who are interested in making that step need to think very strategically about, how do I make sure I network, but not at the expense of the job I'm supposed to be doing. And so I think there's a great balance there. Another piece of advice I was given was, so much of what we do is the relationship building. And, as we all know, when a job opens, there's probably a handful of people already in somebody's mind in terms of being appropriate candidates. So I was given the advice to sit down and say, okay, make a list of the schools that you'd be interested in going to. Put an asterisk by those that you think you could realistically get at this point in time, and be prepared ahead of time with those who could help you get that job. So if School X is on your list, make a list of people that can help you at School X if that job were to open. And that was, I thought, phenomenal advice. First of all, it really helped focus me on where would I go and where wouldn't I go. And it also helped me realize, okay, there are some schools I'd love to go to, but I don't know anybody that could help me with that job. And here are some schools where a lot of people could help me. And it really gave me kind of a great sense of, the process of saying where would I go and where wouldn't I go was fascinating. And interestingly enough, one of the schools on the I would go to list was Ball State, which, as you mentioned, was my first AD job. So I thought that was phenomenal advice.
And speaking of that networking framework, so basically what you've just said is, only 10 years ago, roughly, did you start thinking about being an AD? Is the way in which you needed to network 10 years ago any different than today, given, the change maybe, or the rise in influence even more so now of search firms, or the short tenure on average across the nation of presidents and chancellors? Has anything changed in that 10 years from a networking standpoint?
I don't think dramatically. When you think of the search firms that are significant players in our business today, it's not that different than it was 10 years ago. But in all honesty, Matt, when I first put my hand up, I had not met a single person from a search firm. So it just shows you how far behind that process I was. And now I was blessed because I had an athletic director who, as we all know with Kevin White, there's not a better connected person in our business.
Right.
And he was a great mentor, and he was very open about the process, very willing to help you get out there, not at all threatened by you walking in saying, "Hey, I'm interested in a job. Will you help me?" He would do everything he could to help you. So when I said to him, he actually said to me first, "Would you be interested?" And I said back, "Yes, I would be." He took it upon himself to make sure I began to get to know the people I needed to get to know. And in all honesty, a lot of those are the very same people that are still players in the business today from a search firm standpoint.
Right. And we should add, just for context's sake, that we are recording this interview just minutes after the news has broken that Mack Rhoades apparently is headed from Missouri to Baylor, a search that was handled by Eastman and Bodine. So it'll be interesting to see kind of the dominoes that play out from here. Bill, I want to ask, and I'm curious about the 23 years you spent at Notre Dame. And I assume when you're in a place like South Bend and have a brand like Notre Dame that you're head down working for every day, but you also have some wind at your back because you're Notre Dame in most cases. When you went to Ball State, was there any sort of recalibration that you had to make mentally on how things got done, whether that be quickness, decision-making process, access to funding? Was there any sort of change in your understanding of how to be a really quality athletic director because of the institutional change?
Matt, that's a great question. Clearly, those two institutions are significantly different in a lot of ways. What first dawned on me the very first day I got there, and I still to this day remember the very first definitive decision I was asked to make, and it dawned on me immediately. And I think this would have happened it doesn't matter what school I went to, but it did finally hit me. Holy cow, this is on me. I'm not advising anymore. I'm not recommending. I'm now being asked by the people around me to make a final decision so they could go out and communicate it and execute it. And it immediately gave me empathy with all of my prior bosses. And again, it wasn't necessarily a recalibration. It was just an awareness that, wow, I am now making these decisions and I need to be very thoughtful and strategic. And, I've told young administrators that first period of time, I mean, you've never been in those shoes. At least for me, you've never been in that chair. To some degree, you almost are faking it. You need to act with confidence and decisiveness, and whether you're feeling it internally or not, that's how you have to react. The other thing I learned pretty quickly, you've been at a school as long as I was in South Bend, and it's also my alma mater. So, I actually, from the time I was 11, I lived in South Bend. So, pretty ingrained in the Notre Dame way of doing things. And I learned pretty quickly as you move, I think anyway, as you move from one location to another, don't try to make the new location just like your old location. They're different places. There are different circumstances. It's a different environment. And by the way, the new place, in some ways, may already be doing things better and in better ways than the old place was. So I think there's such a natural tendency to go in and say, well, this is how I did it there. It's how I'm going to do it here. And I pretty quickly realized, wow, they're doing some cool things down here that we weren't doing in South Bend. And let's not jump to conclusions on how things ought to be done.
And that's today's One Question, brought to you by Turnkey Search, a top industry search firm since 1996. One Question is designed to give D1 Ticker subscribers valuable insights on how executive leaders in college athletics think about key issues on their respective campuses, in their departments, or within their leagues and conferences. One Question is brought to you by Turnkey Search, a top industry search firm since 1996.